This is Author's Beat, where you meet fascinating writers and discover their books. I'm Mark H. Newhouse, your host. He was a jet fighter pilot who is now being compared to Shel Silverstein for his riotous poems. His books are loved by children and adults. Author's Beat is proud to present Lenny Lewis, author of The Tickle Tree, Poop, Butt, Booger, and Snot, Why Do Flies Eat Doggy Poop, and Poodles, Tigers, Monsters, and You. And Lenny, that is a mouthful. Where do you get these titles from?
They're just titles from some of the poems, the lead poems in the books.
I have to tell you, I have loved reading your poetry. I've read it to my children, to my grandson, and they all love it. Where do you get your ideas from?
The ideas just come from children. They're just natural things that children do, is what I usually write about.
Do you observe children to get the ideas, or is it something that you remember from your own past?
Actually, both. Sometimes I've remembered it from my past, and sometimes it's just observing children.
And how do kids react to the poems when you read it to them?
Oh, the children like the poems. In general, children today don't like poems. When we start children with poetry, we start them with Keats and Milton. They don't like that. When I go to schools and they say that I'm going to do poetry, you hear this, So I always say, look, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read 5 poems. If you guys don't like them, the assembly's over. We'll vote afterwards.
Oh, you take chances.
Not at all. Not at all.
And have you ever had anybody say we don't like them?
No.
No.
Never.
I can understand that. Would you read an excerpt from one of your poems?
Sure. This is something that happened to me when I was young, actually. I changed it a little bit. But
And from which book is this?
This one is from Why Do Flies Eat Doggy Poop?
And where is this book available?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it's Nook, Kindle.
Oh, they're on Nook and Kindle now.
Yes, they are.
Very good. Yes, go ahead.
I fed my little brother dog food. My mother is really mad. I think it's the best dog food my little brother ever had. Still, she went and called the doctor. Her eyes are filled with tears. So I'm not going to tell her. He's been eating it for years.
Okay. Did you ever have a little brother?
No, this is a story about my cousin and I, and we would go camping and we'd eat the dog food.
You ate the dog food?
Yes. Yeah, and when his mother found out, she was really mad.
Okay. Now, the titles of your books, which was the first book you wrote?
Why Do Flies Eat Doggy Poop?
Okay. Now, where did that title come from? Was that just something that popped into your head?
It's from a poem, and children really do want to know why flies eat doggy poop.
Well, why do they?
Well, you'll have to read the book.
Oh, that's not right. And what was your second book called?
My second book was Poodles, Tigers, Monsters, and You.
Okay, and now, is that all scary poems, or is that funny poems too?
No, they're all funny, and none of them are scary.
None of them are scary?
No.
When you were a child now, did you like reading poetry?
No, not until the 6th grade. I had a 6th grade teacher named Mr. O'Neill, and he would read us poetry. At first, none of the kids wanted to hear it, but he read things that children would like, and after a while, it was like if we were good, he'd read us poems.
Do you remember any of the poets that he would read from that impressed you?
Yeah, Rudyard Kipling.
I loved Rudyard Kipling.
I do too.
Good, very good. So when did you actually start writing poetry?
I'm not sure of the year, but it was, I was reading Where the Sidewalk Ends.
Shel Silverstein.
To my kids, and I didn't even know who he was, but I read a couple of poems, and I says, I could write like this. And they said, no, you couldn't, Daddy. So I flew airplanes. I was gone a lot. When I was away, I'd send poems to them.
So you'd send the poems in the mail?
Yeah, and they kept them and brought them to school, and the teachers thought I should have them published.
What was the first poem you wrote?
My Sticky Dolly.
Do you remember that one?
I can't do that one off the top of my head, and it's not one of my favorites, but it's the first one I wrote.
So the poems got better as you went along?
Well, I'm not saying My Sticky Dolly is a bad poem. It's just not one of my favorites.
When you were a child, who were your heroes? Who were the people you admired most?
Probably Superman.
Yeah, me too, by the way. Were you a comic book collector?
No.
No, not at all. Did you ever think you'd be writing?
Not as a child, no.
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 But when you got older, that was something that you determined you wanted to do?
No. I can just do it.
It just comes naturally to you?
Yes.
You never took a writing class?
Never.
Amazing. So in looking at your poems, how many are there?
How many poems?
Yeah.
Hundreds.
Hundreds that you've done.
Yes.
Okay. What makes your poetry and your books so unique?
I think that most of them have a twist ending that people don't expect. And for children, they really don't expect it. So,
can you give us an example of another poem that has a twist ending?
sure. And this is the poem that kids like the best out of all the poems I've written.
All right, let me sit back here and enjoy it. Go ahead.
Okay. I got a brand new Barbie. She is truly great. I call her Skater Barbie. She can twirl a figure eight. She can go in water, nice and trim and slim. I call her Swimmer Barbie when I take her for a swim. With lots of pretty dresses, she loves to skip and prance. I call her Barbie Dancer when I pretend she's at a dance. But my brother played with matches, and by the time that he was through, I had to change my dolly's name. Now I call her Barbie Q.
Well, now, do you have children of your own?
I do.
How old were they when you were reading these poems to them?
Well, I have my second marriage. I had a child who's much younger, so she was probably 6 or 7.
6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your career. You flew jet planes?
I was in the Air Force. I was a pilot in the Air Force, yes.
Uh-huh. And from there, what did you do?
I retired in Alaska. I stayed in Alaska and opened a business there.
In Alaska?
Yes.
And were you writing poetry then, too?
I was at that time, yes. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. What? I know you're not just writing for children now. You're also doing other things as well?
Yes, I've written some musical comedies. But, you know, these poems, it's amazing. I think slightly over half the people who buy them, the books, are buying them for themselves. My very first book signing, a lady said, "Would you sign this for Bobby?" I said, "Sure." So I signed it and I says, "How old is Bobby?" And she says, "Oh, he's 51. Oh, I also performed at the Comedy Club in the Comedy Zone in Jacksonville.
Oh, that must have been exciting for you.
Well, you know, you have to go through a bunch of interview steps. And I went there and I says, "I do children's poetry." The guy says, "Why are you here?" I says, "Well, if you'll just listen." So
and you auditioned?
Yes, I did. Yeah, and I ended up performing there.
Which poem did you do for them?
Oh, no, I did quite a few because you have to stand up. My shtick is, and it isn't true, I pretend like I was a substitute teacher in an elementary school, and then I just work in poems from
Did
there.
you ever teach?
I did for a short period of time after I retired from the Air Force.
Where was that?
In Tennessee.
In Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Now, when we spoke in private, you told me you never liked reading.
Correct. I was a terrible reader, and I still am a terrible speller.
Why do you think it is that we have so many children who don't like reading?
It's probably the way we teach it, I would think. And that's all I can say.
How would you do it differently?
How would I do it? I don't know.
Yeah. You think it's the kind of books?
I think it's the kind. I know that teachers tell me that that these books, the ones I write, truly do help children read for two reasons. It's something they want to read, and then since it rhymes and has meter, a child will read the poem, learn it, and then he can recite it when he's reading, and that gives him reading confidence.
You know, I don't write poetry very often, but when I do, I write what I call shout out loud rhyme, where you're reading a line and the children then like to shout out the word that rhymes with it. And that's one of the things I like about your poetry. Could you read another one for us?
Sure. Give me a second here. This is one of the first poems I wrote. My daddy's head is broken.
My daddy's head is broken. And which book is this from?
This is again from Why Do Flies Eat Doggy Poop?
Okay.
My daddy's head is broken, right on the very top. He used to have hair grow there. Then something made it stop. Mommy plucks her eyebrows. Could she have plucked his head? Did she sneak into the bedroom when he was fast asleep in bed? At the beach last summer, I remember he had hair. Perhaps when he was swimming, some fishy bit him there. I've really been quite worried about my daddy's head. So I asked my mommy, and this is what she said. Your daddy has no sickness. That isn't what it's called. He's just getting older. Your daddy's going bald.
Do you ever get anybody say to you, that they don't like the name of your book, Why Do Flies Eat Doggy Poop, or what's the other one, Poop, Butt, Booger, and Snot? Do you ever get any kind of reaction to that?
Yes, I do. And it's weird about my books. They either are the most checked out book in the library or they're banned. There's no in between.
You've had books banned?
Yes, because especially in the South. When I grew up, poop, I could say to my teacher, I grew up in Ohio, I have to go poop. But in the South, that's a very bad word. So
I never realized that. Now, when you say your books have been banned, how do you find this out, and do you do anything about it?
No, there's nothing I do about it. I think every school has the right to.
You believe in censorship?
I do. Well, it's not censorship. They're not censoring me. They're just not having my books there. They're not saying the children can't read them. They're just saying they're not going to keep them.
That's interesting. What would you say is the greatest joy of your writing for children?
Oh, when the kids, when you see their eyes light up and they like poetry. I've had a little girl literally fall out of her chair laughing. I mean, she was like a woman. She was slapping her knee. You want to hear the poem that she thought?
I'd love to, yes.
And it's a good poem, but I didn't think a little girl would think it's that funny. Goes, Mom, can I please play with my newborn sister? Because yesterday I really missed her. I was playing baseball, catching flies, talking about her to the other guys. I know she's small, she can't move around, but she could lie there on the ground. Her blanket would protect her face. We want to use her as second base.
Now, let's take that poem for a second. Okay, now when you wrote that poem, did the rhyme come automatically to you?
Yes.
And you don't have to ever rewrite them?
Oh, yes, I do rewrite them.
Uh-huh. And how long would you say it takes from the beginning? Well, in a book, how many poems do you usually have in a book, approximately?
Probably anywhere from 80 to 100.
Uh-huh. And how long does it take from the beginning of you writing the book to when you actually publish it?
It's hard to say because, like I say, I don't write. This stuff comes to me when it does. I write it when I think I have enough poems.
And when do you usually do your writing?
It's weird, but anytime. I can be in the bathroom writing on the highway. It just comes to me.
Yes, I'm like that too. 3 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden you'll get an idea. Is that how it works?
Yes.
And do you have like a way of keeping track of the ideas?
No. And it is, the idea is like only one line. But if I really like the line, then I'll write that line down, and then I can write a poem around it.
Have you ever had anybody sort of critique your poems and say, this is not great poetry, this is not literature?
No. As a matter of fact, my last 2 books won national awards.
What awards did they win?
They won the Reader's Choice Award for Children's Literature and the Moonbeam Award for Children's
Those
Literature.
are both very prestigious awards. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
What I want the Moonbeam Award when I got the call.
Yeah.
The guy said, this was for Poop, Butt, Booger, and Snot. The guy calls and he said, he didn't even say who he was. He says, we didn't think you were going to win with that title, but it's a really good book.
They really liked it, and you know what? I can understand it. Do you ever regret that title? Would you ever, think of changing the title?
I don't think so. I don't think I write to sell. I write so that children will pick up the book and read it.
One of the things we've talked about with other authors is why people write. Okay? And in your case, what you've sounded like is that when ideas hit you, you write. But do you have a passion for writing now? Is this something you've developed at all?
No.
Not at all. In other words, if you could stop writing tomorrow.
I don't know if I could stop writing, but if I did stop writing, it wouldn't set bad with me.
It wouldn't?
No.
Okay. Are you planning any more books of poetry like this?
No, but I've got maybe a fourth of a book done, even though I don't necessarily plan on doing another book. It just comes to me, so.
Okay. When you were a child, what were you like?
Well, I liked sports. I did mediocre in school. I didn't do well in school till about the 6th grade.
Sometimes I think that's what you need to write this kind of poetry. Not necessarily to have that sophistication, but to be able to look at things like a child. Is
I
that
think
the
so.
secret, maybe?
It could be. I don't know why I get these ideas, but I do. One other thing I do, though, at the back of all my books, it's called the not too funny section, because I think if children read poetry, they get values. Most poems teach us values, but children won't pick up Tennyson, they won't pick up Kipling. But if you start them with something like this, and then move to something that's more sophisticated, they will like it. And when I go to schools, I'll read all the funny poems, and at the end, I'll do the serious ones. And with 5th and 6th graders, when they vote on the poems they like the serious ones better.
Could you give us an example of one of your serious poems?
Sure. Do you know who the Tuskegee Airmen were?
I do, but would you explain it to the listeners?
Yeah, since I was a fighter pilot, the Tuskegee Airmen were the first black fighter pilots in the United States military. And this poem is called The Tuskegee Airmen.
Yeah. Could you just do me a favor before you read it? Could you just explain a little bit more about the Tuskegee Airmen? You say they were the first black fighter pilots?
Correct.
Was that in their own unit? Is that how that worked?
Yes, they were in their own unit. I guess at one time we thought black people couldn't fly airplanes or something. This is way before my time, but
we had segregated units in the military.
We did. But the Tuskegee Airmen were, I think, the only black fighter pilot unit in World War II.
In World War II, and they were quite honored, weren't they?
They were very honored.
In fact, I believe the last one just passed away, if I'm not mistaken.
He did, and he lived in this general area.
Please read it now.
Okay. That old man fought in World War II. He once wore Army Air Corps blue. Cataracts now fill brown eyes, the terror filled in foreign skies. He and a brother joined up to fly. From the air he watched that brother die. And you can't really tell by that wrinkled old face, but that old man is a double ace. He strolls by here most every day, always alone since his wife passed away. Uses a cane, shuffles his feet, usually has trouble crossing the street. There is no light and the traffic's fast. He can't see cars if they speed past. So it's an honor to wait, slow my pace, and cross the street with a flying ace. If you start children with a poem like that, you'll turn them right off.
It's a very challenging poem for children, isn't it?
If it's cold, but if you get them interested in poetry, they will sit there and listen to every word.
Do you have another poem that's of a serious nature that you could share with us?
Sure.
And it's funny because you still use the rhyme scheme.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Which is unusual. When I write serious poetry, I usually drop the rhyme scheme. So I admire that.
This is one of my favorites. It's called A Soldier.
And what book is this from?
This is in Poop, Butt, Booger, and Snot.
Poop.
No, I'm sorry. This one is this one is in Why Do Flies Eat Doggy Poop. I'm going to read The Sailor. It's in
The Sailor, it's called?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. My father died upon the sea, 10,000 miles away from me. A naval engagement near Japan. My father was a Navy man. I miss his touch, I miss his face, but I don't lament his resting place. He sleeps upon the ocean floor, some 100 miles from the shore. I walk the beach, I touch a wave, I stand within my father's grave. He gave his life protecting me. It was men like him who kept us free.
How do children react when they hear a poem like this? Do they understand it usually?
Yes, they do. Although they'll write me a lot, and and they'll tell me their favorite poem, and very rarely will a second or third grader choose that as a favorite poem. But a little girl did, and in her letter to me, they always write a picture, and there's this boat and a guy, and the boat is sinking, and there's a guy standing on the deck going bye bye.
It's amazing to me what a varied kind of person you are, because you're writing these very funny poems, and then you put so much heart and emotion into these others. Do teachers use your poetry when you're not presenting it yourself to stimulate writing, for example?
Yes, they do, and I do get a lot of letters and stuff from teachers saying that it's really helped children learn how to read.
Is there a particular poem that the teachers seem to like best?
No, and that surprises me, because when either teachers or children come back with favorite poems, some of the poems are poems that I think, ooh, that's an okay poem, but it's not great. And different things set well with different people.
What's your particular favorite?
I have two particular favorites, but I'll do one.
Okay.
Okay. My brother is an ugly kid, freckles everywhere, a nose that's small and pudgy, and there are cowlicks in his hair. Both his cheeks have dimples. His eyes are much too green. One toe is kind of funny, and his ears are rarely clean. I don't think he's tall enough. His lips are awfully thin. And since I think he's ugly, I don't want to be his twin.
Do you have a brother?
No.
No. Were you an only child?
No, I have a sister.
You have a sister.
Mm-hmm.
Has she read your poetry too?
Yes.
Did you do a poem for her too?
Well, some of the poems in here are things that happened to us.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Will you give us an example?
Sure. This is out of Poop, Butt, Booger, and Snot.
I'm going to let you say that. I'm not going to say that.
Okay. Give me a second here, because
Most of these poems you've memorized, haven't you?
Yes, most of them I have, but this one I have not.
Which is, by the way, a fun thing for kids to do. I mean, when they memorize them with you.
Yes, children will read them over and over, and that's how they recognize. I mean, that's how they memorize them. But they're reading them.
Yeah, they love the rhyming.
Yes, well, and once and then when they can read to somebody, they're happy.
I love your illustrations too in the books. Are they illustrated by the same artist?
No, two different artists. The one book is black and white, and that was done by Charles Clary. And the other book is, or the other three books are in color, and they're done by a woman named Lorraine Harris.
And how much input did you have on the artwork?
Well, with Charles Clary, he has a sense of humor like mine. So he did them, and I thought they were funny. With Lorraine Harris, she does serious art. She never did anything like this. And so sometimes she'll come to me and say, look, I have no idea what to draw. Can you tell me? And so I do.
Go ahead.
All right, this is my sister and I, and it's called Arguing with My Sister. I left the toilet seat up last night. That's what started this terrible fight. My sister gets grumpy if I tease about boys, go in her room and leave my toys. She gets angry when I hog the shower, play in the bathtub for over an hour. But the very maddest that she can get when she sits down and her butt gets wet.
And what did she say when she read that one?
Well, she said, you did that to me. I remember that.
What were your parents like?
My parents were good people. My dad worked in a steel mill, and my mother was a homemaker.
Uh-huh. And did you show any inclination for this at all as a child?
None.
That's what I find absolutely incredible. I've met people who have studied poetry for years and writing for years, and they have not been able to come up with this kind of witty poetry that the kids just eat up alive. Have you ever thought about writing anything for adults, like a novel or...
I've written one musical comedy that was produced.
And what was the name of that?
For the Love of Wanda.
For the Love of Wanda, and that was produced? Okay, and did you... Now, you say it was a musical comedy. Did you also write songs for it?
I wrote the songs, and I wrote the play itself. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. How did that compare to writing these poetry books?
It was easy, I think.
That was easier.
Yes, because I have a potty sense of humor, and with children, you have to be careful what you say. With adults, I can pretty much say what I want to say.
You know, as someone who writes mostly for children as well, I take my responsibilities very seriously. How do you feel about the fact that you're writing for children? Do you feel that you have a sense of responsibility that's different than when you write for adults?
Yes, I do. Uh-huh.
In what way?
Well, there's certain things that will bother children. When I do poems, I go to schools and tell them to teachers because sometimes I have no idea I've done something that maybe isn't correct. You want to hear a poem that I won't put in a
Sure.
book? And they're not bad, but children believe, and you can really upset a child.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
I'm not too sure that Santa is real. There are good reasons for how I feel. If he sees me sleeping at the midnight hour, does he also watch me when I take a shower? I'm not saying he does that, but if he can, they should arrest him. He's a dirty old man.
I can see why that would not go over very well with teachers or children, for that matter.
Actually, and that's another book's kind of writing itself called Kids Poems for Adults, and anything I can't put in a kid's book.
So we can look forward maybe to another book of poetry.
Perhaps, yes.
It's a disease with you, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of.
Well, we only have a few more minutes left. Would you like to share another poem with us?
Sure, I'll do that. This is my other favorite. It's called The T-Rex.
Okay, yeah, I love that one too.
Okay. A tiny little T-Rex was scolded by his mother. She told him it was not polite to eat his baby brother. T-Rex didn't know that. Tears welled in his eyes. He solemnly promised Mother to be good and not tell lies, which is why he would not answer Mother's frantic quiz. He did not want to talk about where his little sister is.
You know what? I want to squeeze in one more. You have time?
Sure.
Good. Let's go for one more.
Okay. I'll make it from Poop, Butt, Booger, and Snot.
Okay.
Oh, this is called My Sister's Diet. I kind of like this one. I tooted in our refrigerator, and then I closed the door. My sister's on a diet. She's not eating anymore. It's true I have to listen to my sister cry and whine, but I look on the bright side. Now the chocolate cake's all mine.
Well, Lenny, I've just enjoyed this so much with you today. Let's go over the names of the books again. It's Poop, Butt, Booger, and Snot. And you see, I did say it. It's The Tickle Tree. And the other one is called Why Do Flies Eat Doggy Poop? Poodles, Tigers, and Monsters, and You. And Lenny, I want to thank you so very much for being here. What's your advice to anyone who wants to write poetry or wants to write?
Then write. That's my advice. I don't think you should write to sell. I think you should write to write.
And you know what, Lenny? That means you do have a passion for writing. So I hope we're going to have another book of poetry from you very, very soon.